Hey, welcome to Woven in True Crime. Here, we dive into real-life stories that shocked the world, dark tales of mystery, horror, and tragedy that left a mark on everyone who heard them. Get ready to explore crimes so disturbing, you'll start questioning where the line between fiction and reality really is. Today, we're taking you to Brazil, where Halloween, usually a night for fun and costumes, turned into something much more sinister. In some of these stories, the costumes were so convincing, people didn't even realize the horror was real, until it was too late. Now, Halloween isn't as big in Brazil as it is here in the US, but this time of year still seems to bring out some of the darkest, most brutal crimes. And tonight, we're counting down 10 shocking murder cases that happened on or around Halloween in Brazil, where the fictional scares of the holiday became real-life nightmares. From family arguments that spiraled into murder, to gang fights that turned Halloween parties into bloodbaths. And in one story, the killer's costume was so perfect, nobody realized the blood was real until it was way too late. 1. A Brazilian family murder, 2011. In September 2011, 19-year-old Bianca Consoli was found brutally murdered in her own home in São Paulo. The killer? Someone she should have been able to trust, her brother-in-law, Sandro Dota. Bianca was strangled and stabbed in broad daylight, while she was home alone. At first, nobody could figure out who did it. The house wasn't broken into, and nothing looked out of place. But things quickly got dark when police started looking into the people closest to her. Suspicion fell on Sandro, who had always had a rocky relationship with Bianca. He wasn't just the husband of her sister, he had a history of tension and arguments with her. And the evidence that sealed his fate? DNA found under Bianca's fingernails, she had fought back against him, leaving behind the proof that would later confirm his guilt. Turns out, Sandro had planned the whole thing. He staged the scene to look like a robbery, hoping to throw police off his trail. But his lies fell apart under the weight of the forensic evidence and his own suspicious behavior. The truth was worse than anyone imagined. He had developed a twisted obsession with Bianca, and when he couldn't control her, he snapped. What makes this case so chilling isn't just the brutal nature of the crime, but the fact that it happened inside the family. In 2013, Sandro was sentenced to 39 years in prison for the murder of his sister-in-law. The crime shocked Brazil, not only because it was so violent, but because it shattered the sense of safety we all expect in our own homes. But what really left people speechless was the motive, a dark obsession that no one saw coming. 2. The Halloween murder of Andrea Werner, 2014. On Halloween night in 2014, 28-year-old Andrea Werner was brutally murdered in her apartment in Belo Horizonte, Brazil. What started as a festive night ended in a horror no one saw coming. Andrea and her boyfriend had gone to a Halloween party together, but things took a dark turn when they got home. A heated argument broke out, and in a fit of rage, her boyfriend stabbed her multiple times. Andrea didn't stand a chance. After realizing what he had done, her boyfriend came up with a twisted plan. He tried to stage the scene to make it look like Andrea had taken her own life. He moved her body and manipulated the evidence, hoping to throw investigators off his trail. But the evidence didn't lie. The signs of a violent struggle were everywhere, and police quickly saw through his story. The murder of Andrea Werner sent shockwaves through the community. This wasn't just another tragic crime, it happened on Halloween, a night already filled with symbols of death and darkness. The fact that it occurred during this eerie holiday only made it more disturbing. What made this case even more heartbreaking was that there were signs. Friends and family later revealed that Andrea had talked about problems in her relationship, but no one imagined it would end like this. Her boyfriend was arrested and later convicted of her murder. Andrea's death served as a chilling reminder of how easily emotional and physical abuse can be ignored, until it's too late. But what no one could understand was how a night of celebration turned into a deadly nightmare. 3. Murder on Halloween in São Paulo. On the night of October 31, 2009, when terror was supposed to be confined to costumes and decorations, a Halloween party at a popular nightclub in São Paulo turned into a scene of real violence. The venue was filled with young people in costumes, spider webs draping the space, low lighting casting shadows, and eerie music filling the air. The spooky atmosphere promised fun, but a real nightmare was about to unfold. Amidst the masks and costumes, a fight broke out, and many partygoers, caught up in the spirit of the night, thought it was just part of the act. What seemed like another Halloween show soon turned deadly. The attackers, also young, swarmed the victim with punches and kicks, and as the violence escalated, the line between fiction and reality blurred, leaving onlookers confused about the seriousness of the situation. By the time people realized the horror wasn't just a performance, it was already too late. The victim, unconscious on the floor, received delayed help. The nightclub's security team was slow to intervene, and even after paramedics arrived, the young man didn't survive his injuries, passing away hours later at the hospital. The crime sparked outrage, with many questioning the responsibility of the organizers and their failure to stop the violence before it escalated into something fatal. The attackers were identified and arrested a few days later, but the tragedy exposed the vulnerability of crowded events and the lack of adequate security. That Halloween night, the real terror wasn't in the costumes, but in the brutality no one managed to stop. What was meant to be a night of playful celebration ended in unforgettable tragedy. How could a night of fun turn into such senseless violence? On October 31st, the real horror was revealed behind the masks, and no one saw the nightmare coming. 4. The Scream Mask Murder, 2017. On the night of October 31st, 2017, during a Halloween party in Curitiba, Paraná, what was meant to be a celebration of fictional horror turned into real-life terror. A man, dressed as the iconic Ghostface from the Scream movie, fatally stabbed his friend in the middle of the party. Disguised as one of the most recognizable characters in horror cinema, the attacker found in the Ghostface mask the perfect cover to confuse those around him, creating a macabre atmosphere that made the tragedy even more ironic. The victim and the attacker, who were close friends, had argued earlier that night, but the tension seemed to have eased. However, without warning, the man in the mask grabbed a knife and attacked his friend, delivering fatal blows. The party, filled with eerie costumes, dim lighting, and themed decorations, provided the perfect setting for confusion. Many of the attendees, immersed in the Halloween spirit, thought the violent act was part of a performance, and the initial screams were seen as part of the show. As the screams grew more desperate and blood began to stain the floor, the festive atmosphere dissolved into real panic. It was only then that the crowd realized it wasn't a joke but a brutal attack unfolding before their eyes. The killer attempted to flee, still masked, but was restrained by other partygoers until the police arrived. The crime shocked the city, not only because of its brutality but also due to the cruel irony of a murder happening during a party meant to celebrate fictional terror. The killer was arrested and later convicted, but the memory of that dark night remains, serving as a grim reminder that sometimes the line between fantasy and real horror can be dangerously thin. On that Halloween night, the real nightmare wasn't in the masks or costumes but in the unexpected betrayal that ended in murder. What should have been a night of fun turned into a scene of genuine terror. How can a celebration of the fictional transform into such real violence? Amid the shadows and laughter, true horror hid behind a mask everyone recognized, but no one expected. 5. Real terror on Halloween, the Fortaleza crime. On the night of October 31, 2018, during a Halloween party in Fortaleza, Sarah, what was supposed to be an evening of fun turned into a nightmare. Lucas, a fictitious name, a 21-year-old university student, was attending a costume party organized by his classmates. The event, held at a local club packed with young people, was known for its lively atmosphere. The booming music, creative costumes, and decorations filled with terrifying symbols made everyone believe it would be an unforgettable night, but for reasons no one could have imagined. The tragedy began with a heated exchange between Lucas and another partygoer. What started as simple taunts quickly escalated. Witnesses reported shouting, pushing, and then, in a moment that stunned the crowd, the aggressor pulled out a gun and shot Lucas in the chest. As the gunshot echoed through the hall, panic set in. Screams replaced laughter, and within seconds, what had been a night of fun dissolved into chaos as people scattered in every direction, desperately seeking cover. Lucas was rushed to a nearby hospital by friends and security guards, but sadly, he succumbed to his injuries shortly after. His death shocked the academic community, and the case sparked a wave of reactions on social media. Videos and personal accounts of the incident spread quickly, intensifying public outrage and grief. The police soon identified and arrested the shooter, a man known for his involvement in criminal activities. The incident reignited discussions about gun violence at social events, particularly at gatherings of young people, and brought attention to the issue of illegal firearms. On that Halloween night, the true terror wasn't found in the costumes or decorations, but in a trivial argument that, with a gun involved, quickly escalated into a tragedy. It became painfully clear that, when weapons are present, even a celebration can become a nightmare in an instant. 6. Halloween Party Murder in Porto Alegre, 2016. On October 31, 2016, a Halloween party in Porto Alegre, Rio Grande do Sul, ended in tragedy when a man was shot and killed. The party took place at a local club, packed with costumed attendees. The atmosphere was full of spooky costumes, laughter, and loud music, creating the perfect setting for fun, yet no one imagined the night would end in real terror. The victim, a 25-year-old man, was at the event with friends when an argument broke out. The reason? Jealousy. What started with glares and taunts quickly escalated to shouting and shoving. Tension mounted as the crowd watched, believing it was all part of the Halloween fun, until the sound of a gunshot echoed through the room. In the heat of the fight, the aggressor pulled out a gun and shot the victim, hitting him fatally. When the shot rang out, panic spread through the party. Colorful costumes and eerie makeup were soon mixed with chaos as people ran in every direction, trying to escape the violence no one expected to witness on a night of celebration. The victim was rushed to the hospital but didn't survive the injury, passing away before he could be saved. The shooter fled the scene but was captured by police days later. The weapon was recovered, and the gunman was identified as someone with a history of violence and personal conflicts with the victim. The tragedy shocked the city of Porto Alegre and sparked discussions about security at large events, especially when alcohol is involved. Organizations that host costume parties began adopting stricter safety measures after the incident. That Halloween night, the terror didn't come from the costumes or decorations but from the real violence that hid within the crowd. What should have been a joyful celebration turned into a tragedy that no one would ever forget. 7. Deadly kill in Araraquara, 2019. On Halloween night in 2019, a costume party in Araraquara, São Paulo, turned into the scene of a tragedy. Two friends, both 22 years old, who were celebrating the event together, began to argue after consuming large amounts of alcohol. What started as a verbal dispute quickly escalated into physical aggression. The party, which had been lively with spooky costumes and loud music, was at its peak when real horror crept into the scene. According to witnesses, one of the friends, completely intoxicated, grabbed a kitchen knife from the party and violently attacked the other. The fatal blow was a deep stab to the abdomen, and blood quickly began to spread on the floor, abruptly silencing the laughter and music. Screams of horror filled the room as partygoers, shocked, tried to comprehend what had just happened. The festive atmosphere turned into panic and despair. Desperate, friends tried to help the victim, but he had lost too much blood and died before the ambulance arrived. The police were called, and the attacker, still in shock, was arrested at the scene. He claimed to have no memory of the exact moment he stabbed his friend, blaming the alcohol and the tension for the tragedy. Under the influence of alcohol, he acted without control, unable to grasp the severity of his actions until it was too late. The death deeply shocked the usually quiet town of Araraquara, making headlines in local news and reigniting discussions about excessive alcohol consumption at parties. The tragedy served as a grim reminder of how minor conflicts, when mixed with alcohol, can quickly spiral into irreversible acts of violence. What was supposed to be a night of fun and friendship ended in devastation, showing how a celebration can turn into a nightmare when violence comes into play. 8. Bloody Halloween, in Salvador, 2012. On Halloween night in 2012, what was supposed to be a celebration in Salvador, Bahia, turned into a night of horror that would later be remembered as the Bloody Halloween. The party, held in a public space in the city's outskirts, attracted hundreds of young people in costumes. The area was decorated with glowing pumpkins and artificial cobwebs, while the loud music filled the air, setting the perfect atmosphere for a night of fun. But the real horror was yet to come. The tragedy began when two rival gang groups, whose tensions were well known in the community, crossed paths at the party. What started with glares and insults quickly escalated into an all-out brawl. Within minutes, what had been a lively celebration turned into a battleground. Fists flew, screams filled the air, and then, the terrifying sound of gunshots echoed through the darkness. The crowd erupted into chaos. People who had been dancing and laughing moments before, now ran in all directions, desperate to escape the violence. Costumes stained with blood, panicked screams, and the terror of not knowing where the shots were coming from consumed the night. In the midst of the chaos, a 20-year-old man, completely uninvolved with the gangs, was shot in the chest and died on the spot. 3 others were injured as ambulances rushed to the scene, trying to save those caught in the violence. The police arrived quickly, but the shooters had already fled. The Bloody Halloween made headlines across the city, becoming a tragic example of the urban violence that plagues the outskirts of many Brazilian cities. What should have been a night of fun and laughter became a nightmare for the community. After the incident, public events like this began to be more heavily monitored by the police, but the Bloody Halloween remains etched in Salvador's memory as a night when joy was replaced by real terror. 9. Balneario Camboriú, in Santa Catarina, is famous for its vibrant parties and intense nightlife, especially during themed events like Halloween. On October 31, 2015, one such party, held at a local club, ended in tragedy when a fight between 2 men escalated into murder. The argument stemmed from jealousy, as both men were interested in the same woman. What had been a night of laughter, music, and fun costumes was suddenly shattered by screams as the atmosphere turned from celebration to horror. Witnesses reported that the tension between the 2 men had been building throughout the night. As the argument escalated, the music seemed to fade into the background, and all eyes turned toward the confrontation. In a fit of uncontrollable rage, one of the men lunged at the other, grabbing a knife from the club's kitchen and delivering multiple fatal blows. The 27-year-old victim collapsed to the ground, gravely injured and bleeding. Panic swept through the crowd as people in costumes scattered, trying to distance themselves from the bloodied scene. What had been a carefree night of fun turned into chaos. The assailant tried to flee but was quickly restrained by the club's security until the police arrived. The victim was rushed to the hospital but tragically succumbed to his injuries on the way. The brutal crime caused widespread shock in the city, not only because of its savage nature but also due to the fact that it happened during a festive Halloween celebration. In the midst of Halloween costumes and spooky decorations, real horror unfolded, far more terrifying than anyone expected. The incident prompted nightclubs across the city to strengthen their security protocols, ensuring that weapons could not be brought into or used inside their establishments. The night that began with fun and fantasy ended as a grim reminder that violence can strike when least expected, even in the midst of celebration. The tragedy left a lasting mark on Balneario Camboriú, highlighting how quickly jealousy and rage can turn murder. 10. Halloween Murder in Ribeirão Preto, 2020. On the night of October 31, 2020, right in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, a Halloween party in Ribeirão Preto went from reckless celebration to brutal murder. The party was thrown at a remote farm outside the city, bringing together dozens of young people who ignored the pandemic restrictions. With no security and no supervision, it quickly turned into a disaster. The victim, a 24-year-old man, got into an argument with other partygoers. According to reports, the fight started over disagreements about drugs and alcohol. What began as a heated exchange quickly escalated into violence, with tension rising until punches were thrown. As tempers flared, the atmosphere, already chaotic because of the illegal party, became a full-on brawl. The man was brutally beaten by several people, suffering severe injuries, mostly to his head. Punches and kicks rained down as he tried to defend himself, but it was no use. After the attack, he was left unconscious on the ground, and the attackers, along with everyone else at the party, fled the scene. Neighbors, hearing the screams and the commotion, called the police. By the time officers arrived, the place was deserted except for the victim, bloodied and barely alive. He was rushed to the hospital, but tragically, he didn't make it and died hours later. The young man's death caused outrage in the local community, especially since the party was illegal and held during such a critical time in the pandemic, putting everyone at risk. Police launched an investigation to find the people involved in the beating, questioning several who had attended the party. This tragedy served as a stark reminder of the dangers of illegal parties during the pandemic, where a lack of supervision, mixed with alcohol and drugs, often leads to violence. What should have been a night of fun and costumes turned into a real-life horror, showing just how fast reckless behavior can have deadly consequences. And there you have it, 10 of the most chilling and tragic Halloween murders, showing how a fun night can quickly turn into real-life horror. If these stories shocked you as much as they shocked me, make sure to hit that like button to let us know. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more true crime stories that dig into the dark side of everyday events. We'd love to hear your thoughts on these cases, so drop a comment below and tell us which one hit you the hardest. And of course, if you know someone who's into true crime, share this video with them. Let's get these stories out there. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the real horror isn't in the costumes, but in what's happening behind the mask. Stay safe, and we'll see you in the next video.